so that they could cultivate the rainforest and pay back their debt to the World Bank. This was 1973. Here we see another Landsat image taken 14 years later in 1987. And you can see the amount of that tropical rainforest that has been felled for the cultivation of crops. And this is what has happened. The trees are chopped down to make way for cultivation. The logs are burnt so that the charcoal can be sold, and the inhabitants, the Rondonia Red Indians, are hounded ever further to the east, trying to find a suitable habitat for themselves. These are people who still live in the Stone Age, and they move ever further towards the mouth of the Amazon River, trying to find a new habitat. And in their wake, behind them come the slash and burn farmers. Here we see them jubilantly winnowing their first harvest of rice, a very good crop in the Amazon forest in the first year of cultivation. But the second crop is no good at all, because the humus in the soil has been destroyed in less than 18 months. And so they slash and burn deeper into the forest to get another year's cultivation, and in their wake comes the inevitable soil erosion that follows that sort of procedure. This is the most terrifying picture I'm going to show you. It's again a Landsat image, this time taken over the northern Transvaal, and when it came to my attention some years ago, I put this black line in. It was the boundary around this portion of Leboa in the northern Transvaal. And can you see the difference that shows up between Leboa and the surrounding cultivated areas, these little red spots? Each of those little red spots is one of these circulating what do they call them? Irrigation, rotary irrigation schemes. Overstocking by cattle and goats in Leboa, and scavenging for the little bit of firewood that is left, has left Leboa, has created a virtual desert situation in Leboa. Much the same thing has happened to the north of us in Mauritania, in the Sahel. You see the feeble attempts that are being made to try and halt the advance of the Sahara Desert in the Sahel. And so vast is this scale of destruction to the biosphere that the world's climatic regimes, have you noticed, are definitely starting to change. Hurricanes are wreaking more damage than ever before. Typhoons, well, we read about them. We yawn when we read about these climatic phenomena. We used to read about them once every year or 10 years, but now they're in our newspapers every day. Brumbies died as a result of the El Nino-induced drought in Australia in 1983. And let me quote from this morning's Star newspaper about El Nino. As El Nino soaks both coasts of the mainland United States with relentless rain, it's drying up the island of Hawaii, where Hilo has long boasted of being the wettest city of America. A state of emergency has been declared, and residents are under orders to cut water consumption by 10%. Right, that's El Nino. El Nino, it's in our newspapers every day. We've come to take it as part of our daily life. Let's just take a quick look at what is happening to some of our indigenous animals. The Roan antelope is retreating before the advance of hunters and farmers. There are only, now let me tell you this, there were only 350 of these creatures left when I first gave this talk a few years ago. There were 350 left in the Kruger Park, and precious few elsewhere. I checked yesterday with Dr. John Ledger of the Endangered Wildlife Trust. I asked him how many of these Roan antelopes there still are in the Kruger Park. He said 8. The Cape vulture is being killed by the careless use of strychnine, which is used by farmers to poison jackals, and the vultures feed on the poisoned carcasses. The martial eagle, farmers shoot it out on sight because they think that it is decimating their flocks, and yet only 3% of its prey are on lambs or on kids, and then only on the weaker of those young species. But Dr. John Ledger told me that the farmers in the Kalahari at last have got the message that this creature is not decimating their flocks. So at least in the Kalahari area, the martial eagle is at last on the increase. I'm sorry to say that in the Transvaal it's still rapidly on the decrease. The black rhino, the Endangered Wildlife Trust gave me these figures that in 1960s there were 100,000 of these left. By the 1980s there were 15,000. By the 1990s there are only 3,500 of them left. And now we hear that the African elephant, this is not an endangered species, I'm happy to say, the African elephant, but it's very distressing when we read yesterday in the Star newspaper that 20 of these African elephants were killed by poachers in Kenya last week. And in South Africa, I'm told that the population at last of the African elephant is starting to increase again because there is proper management of the elephant both in South Africa and in Zimbabwe. The aardwolf, really a sheep in wolf's clothing, it eats no lambs, it eats only termites, and yet farmers shoot it out on sight because they believe that it's decimating their flocks. Dr. Don Ledger tells me that these are now also dying from pesticides that are being sprayed on locust swarms, and so there are very few of these creatures left. He has told me that, Dr. Ledger of the Endangered Wildlife Trust, that the most seriously endangered species are the riverine rabbit, the African wild dog. There are only 375 of these left in the Kruger Park. The black-footed cat, the blue swallow, there are only 80 pairs left in the world. The blue crane, which is our South African national bird, is on the endangered list. And strangely enough, he tells me that the lion, it is also an endangered species. It seems that the lion is dying out. And it makes one wonder, is this also rapidly becoming an endangered species? Well, so much for the past, so much for the present. Let's take a quick look at the prediction for the future, and let me start by quoting Teilhard de Chardin. At last, the Judeo-Christian tradition is producing radical new insights into the nature and the future of our planet. Teilhard de Chardin, a Jesuit and a geologist like myself, was probably the first person to bring together in his own psyche the insights that come from 40,000 years of a spiritual tradition, and he put these together with the contemporary scientific tradition. He integrated the two into a worldview which has probably done more to shape the modern world than any of us yet understand. He died, unhappily, before the popular perception of the Earth as a living, single organism. He was one of the earliest people to recognize what is now known as Gaia a single living organism, our planet, of which we are all part. But he was possibly the first person to see the Earth, to recognize the Earth, and all of us upon it as a single living organism with a soul. And other scientists at last are starting also to see the same thing. Let me just quote one, for the sake of brevity. Eric Chaisson of Harvard University has recently had this to say. He said, "We are not independent entities alien to the Earth. The Earth in its turn is not adrift in a vacuum unrelated to the cosmos. The cosmos itself is no longer cold and hostile because it is our universe. It brought us forth and it maintains our being. And we are, in that very little sense of the words, children of the universe." So, where do we, children of the universe, stand right now? Is humanity closing down the curtain on evolution? By the year 2000, which is just less than 2 years away, shall we, as predicted by the Worldwide Fund for Nature, shall we have caused the extinction of as many as 1 million of the Earth's 5 million species? Are we witnessing a period of extinction similar to that which wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago? Well, we may not know how to bring back an extinct species, and we may not know how to reverse the spread of the deserts, and we may not know how to repair the holes in the ozone layer. And we geologists are only now starting to learn how to dispose safely of our nuclear waste. And yet, I believe that the future is sustainable if we start to realize that both the causes and the effects of the problems that threaten the Earth are global, and they must be attacked globally. Our wasteful, careless ways must become a thing of the past. We must recycle more. We must procreate less. We must turn off lights. We must use mass transit. And we must do 1,000 things differently, each and every one of us in our everyday lives, because whenever we waste energy or spread litter or build something ugly, we align ourselves with the despoilers of nature. And it is the sum total of millions of apparently small decisions taken by each of us every day that in the end will convert our land into an ugly desert or into a fruitful and beautiful home. And I have some hope in the work of scientists, the International Geosphere Biosphere Program. Scientists worldwide are addressing the problem. They are instituting research into world climate, and they tell us that in a couple of years' time, we hope we will know exactly where we stand. How much longer has our planet got of life on this Earth? Or what have we got to do collectively as the masters of creation to reverse the trends that are killing our planet? Well, let me conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by just referring to a group of conservationists and religious leaders from around the world who met together recently in the ancient town of Assisi in Italy. They came in a spirit of celebration and common purpose to mark the 25th anniversary of the world's best-known conservation organization, the WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature. And they chose the birthplace of St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of ecology, as the ideal setting in which to proclaim a new partnership. And the event was marked by a unique interfaith ceremony in the magnificent Basilica of St. Francis, there were representatives there of the world's 5 major faiths who met to discuss what each had to say about nature and conservation. And declarations were prepared and publicly addressed to the followers of each of these faiths: the Buddhists, the Christians, the Hindus, the Muslims, and the Jews. And on this occasion, the WWF president at the time, the Duke of Edinburgh, spoke in these words. He said, "We came to Assisi to find vision and hope. Vision to discover a new and caring relationship with the rest of our living world, and hope that the destruction of nature can be stopped before all is wasted and lost." And he went on to say, "I believe that today in this famous shrine of the Saint of Ecology, a new and powerful alliance has been forged between the forces of religion and the forces of conservation." And on the same occasion, Father Lanfranco Serini, the Minister General of the Franciscans, spoke of the Christian responsibility for God's creation